Bobby Drake, the Iceman, is part of Professor Xavier's original X-Men team, being one of the originals as mentioned several times in the comics. Initially, he was the team's clown, never taking anything too seriously and using his powers more casually. But over time, he was further developed, gaining more layers in his personality and evolving his powers to the point of being one of the few Omega-level mutants on Earth. The character is so extraordinary that he has accomplished feats like terraforming Mars and freezing an infernal dimension. But many questions arise about his powers, such as whether he actually transforms into ice or just covers himself with the material, or how he's able to teleport other people when he manipulates water. So, these and other questions about the most famous cryokinetic mutant are what I will answer today. Data. Bobby is a mutant who stands about 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighs 143 pounds, and has brown eyes and hair. He was born in Long Island, USA. Unlike other characters I've discussed here, he is always drawn the same way, as his powers don't significantly alter his general appearance. Of course, the style varies slightly with different artists, but the essence of the character remains the same. Origin. Bobby is the son of William Drake and Madeline Drake, and during a certain period of his childhood, he often felt very cold, to the point of constantly trembling. His powers truly manifested when he accidentally froze his swimming pool. From that moment on, he and his parents hid the fact that he was a mutant. However, at 16 years old, he and his girlfriend were attacked by a gang. And with few options, he used his powers to freeze everyone who attacked him. He was so persecuted by the residents of his town for being a mutant that the local sheriff detained him for his own protection until Cyclops and Xavier arrived and recruited him. Powers. The list of Iceman's powers is ridiculously extensive. It's impressive how someone who controls ice and water can do so much. Fortunately, I already have an entire video dedicated to his list of powers. So here I will focus on specific abilities and how his physiology interacts with these powers, since that is the focus of this video. First, let's talk about his transformation. Yes, he does entirely transform into ice in this form. In fact, he learned to transform, as initially he just covered himself with ice and operated looking like a walking snowman. He can absorb moisture from the environment to create his ice constructions, transform into ice, and regenerate. But I'll talk a bit more about the regeneration part later. An interesting detail is that for him to absorb local moisture, the air must have a certain minimum amount. Drier locations leave him more worn out. But how does he know the amount of moisture present? It's simple. He has stated that he can see temperature variations in the atmosphere. In other words, he has visual sensitivity to infrared wavelengths, so he likely sees the world similarly to the colorful thermograms produced by thermal imaging equipment. However, unlike these devices that focus on increased temperature, Iceman can also see heat and cold in the air and in living beings. So, characters who become camouflaged or even invisible at times cannot catch him by surprise. But back to his transformation, when his powers are activated, his internal structures, such as organs and bones, transform into an organic form of ice. Even if this ice is destroyed, he can mentally recover from the damage, even if his entire body has been shattered. If the ice that was part of his body is no longer available, he absorbs water from the environment to replace what was lost. As the absorbed moisture mixes with the organic ice, his physical form begins to reconstitute. Another interesting detail is that the ice, even though it's organic, behaves like regular ice and can turn into gaseous state if subjected to a powerful enough fire attack. Even if he melts, he can simply cause the droplets to regroup and condense back into his original form without any harm to his health. But that's easier said than done. Despite being made of ice, which is generally fragile, his body is tough enough to withstand punches from Juggernaut and blasts from Cyclops without getting injured. He can also use moisture from the environment to enhance his external features, adding ice claws or spikes to his body that aren't present in his human form. He can even expand the perimeter of the sub-zero aura around his body, like the time he reduced the temperature of his surroundings by 76 degrees in less than a second. This causes his opponents to experience freezing symptoms in mere moments, resulting in permanent damage to the skin tissue, but Iceman himself is immune. A race that suffers greatly from the type of attack is the Skrulls, as although they can alter their physiology to resist cold, they are still organic beings. Therefore, they are not capable of fully withstanding the below zero temperatures that he can unleash. But speaking a bit about another well-known power of the mutant, it's his ice generation. With the right concentration, he can create an endless army of autonomous ice clones and constructions. He can also generate semi-autonomous ice golems that act independently. This is because he has subconscious control over them. But there's a theory that his organic droplets pass into his golems, which would be enough for them to have limited sentience. If his creations don't receive specific commands, they automatically fight alongside Iceman. Finally, addressing the question I raised in the introduction about how he's able to teleport people if his power is water control. This is due to a subcategory of his powers, molecular moisture conversion, allowing him to transform water into matter and vice versa. Combining this with the fact that he can mentally sense every portion of water on the planet. He simply takes his consciousness along with the others to a location and transforms the water in their bodies. The bodies left behind undergo the reverse treatment, turning into water, ice, or even vapor. For Bobby himself, this doesn't generate any consequences, but others who have undergone this process have complained of it being extremely painful. Abilities. In addition to his powers, Iceman possesses abilities that can be acquired by anyone willing to train. Like all other X-Men, he has been trained in hand-to-hand combat without the use of weapons, as well as mental training to resist telepathic attacks. Furthermore, he serves as a teacher for a young mutants, is a certified public accountant, and even handles Xavier's accounts. He also speaks Spanish fluently. Weaknesses. Despite being absurdly powerful, Bobby is far from invincible and has a few weaknesses. His powers are related to his physical health and mental state. Under normal conditions, he can create ice for up to 5 hours straight before becoming mentally exhausted. However, if the strain of his ice creation is too high, the number can even decrease, as was the case when he froze part of Hell and became exhausted immediately. Creating clones is also exhausting since he usually needs to mentally create and control each one individually. However, when in snowy environment, this strain seems to be lessened as he uses the available material to create the clones instead of generating them out of nothing. His creativity in using his powers is not as great, as most of the time he uses his powers superficially. The character himself limits himself out of fear of what he can do if he truly lets go and fights with all he has.